As graduate students and postdocs, we spend a lot of time talking about our projects with people in our lab, with people in our program, with people in the department, with people in our professional societies. But we don't often step back and plan to tell that story to people outside of our discipline. This is where the research story can help. The goal for the research story is to engage, excite, and start a conversation. The goal is not for you to stand up and speak uninterrupted for 3 to 5 minutes explaining everything that you do. It's to give information to people that makes them inquisitive, gets them to ask some questions, and invites them into the dialogue. The research story describes what it is that you do. This is your chance to share with people on a daily basis the kinds of questions you ask, the work that you do, and the findings that you have. To do that effectively, it needs to be tailored for each audience. Not everyone will need the same information. More importantly, not everyone will care about the same things. Creating a broad research story that is useful for multiple audiences best positions you to effectively engage in these kinds of conversations. To do that effectively, we need to make sure that it also performs a human connection. Emotion is important for memory, but in research and science, we're often told that we need to be objective about the work that we do. But that's not how humans work. Emotion cements memory. When you can form a connection and help someone feel the importance of the work that you do, they're more likely to be interested and to remember it. Finally, to make this effective, you need to create clear, accessible explanations of your research. What do I mean? I mean no jargon. Now, this can be very difficult for graduate students and postdocs. As we're building our expertise, we're often criticized if we don't use the correct terminology. When we give a presentation for our department or our program, if we haven't been exacting in our language, that's often pointed out. But you need to resist that urge. Being able to explain what it is that you do without using that technical terminology actually demonstrates greater mastery of the material. To do this, you can create a non-science analogy, which we'll focus on next. The final point I would make, though, is that you can always get more technical. But if you start too technical, you lose your audience. Remember, the goal of the research story is to establish dialogue. If someone steps into the conversation, that's a win. Creating a non-science analogy is a great way to start conversations about your research because it allows people to understand what you do regardless of their scientific background. Here are some examples. When I was a graduate student, I studied cocaine and dopamine transporter function. The role of the dopamine transporter is to remove dopamine from the extracellular space and terminate neurotransmission. Cocaine works by blocking dopamine transporter function, allowing that dopamine to remain and continue sending signals. An easy analogy for this would be a vacuum cleaner. The role of a vacuum cleaner is to remove dirt up off a rug. But if that vacuum cleaner gets clogged up with a hairball, it can no longer remove that dirt. That's kind of gross, but it's also pretty memorable. Another example I like is from a scientist who was a taste bud stem cell researcher. They developed an analogy using cooking and spices. The analogy would be you have these core ingredients, a tomato, an onion, and olives. But depending on what kind of spices you add, that could become an Indian dish, an Italian dish, or a Mediterranean dish. A third analogy dealt with ion channels. Ion channels allow different size ions inside to a cell. The analogy this scientist came up with was a dog door. You can imagine ion channels functioning like a dog door that allows different size dogs through that space. You're not going to get a Doberman or a Great Dane through a dog door that's built for a Chihuahua. Again, the goal of the non-science analogy is that it is an explanation of the work that you do that does not require any technical expertise. Now, this is easier said than done. Developing effective non-science analogies is quite a project and will take some time. So as you work on it, think about workshopping and asking your colleagues, does this make sense? I'm confident that you'll get there. So how does this work in practice? We've got our non-science analogy. How do we put it together? You want to start with a question. Remember, the goal of the research story is to invite people into the conversation. Don't assume what they know. Don't assume what they don't know. Start off by asking. With my research story, I would begin by figuring out what do people know about dopamine. Have you heard of dopamine? Now I can give them space to share their expertise, where they feel like this is a conversation and not me lecturing to them. Once I've heard what they have to say, then I can move on. Right, dopamine is a chemical in our brains that signals when we've done something that feels good, and it makes us want to do that thing again. Our brain stops dopamine from doing its thing by sucking it back up into the cells that released it with something called the dopamine transporter, or DAT. This is like a vacuum cleaner sucking up dirt off a rug. Cocaine works by blocking the vacuuming power of the DAT, just like a big dust ball can clog up a vacuum cleaner and prevent it from picking up the dirt. Interestingly, not all people who try cocaine are affected the same way, and I study how cocaine's ability to block the DAT's vacuuming power may contribute to that individual variability. This could impact why only some people become addicted to cocaine. Regardless of your understanding of neuroscience, you now know something about how cocaine functions and the impact that that can have on different people's development of addiction. If there are more questions, if you have a deeper understanding, we can always get more specific about what we found. But if nothing else, you've left with an understanding of the kind of work that I do. Again, the goal of the research story is to create space for people to ask questions and have a general idea of your area of expertise. The research story is only one piece to preparing for an informational interview, however. Typically, you would use the research story when someone asks you a question like, "Tell me what you do." Tell me why you do that, though, is a different area. That's where the career story comes in. The career story is designed to describe why you do what you do and how you do it. The why is really about your motivations. Why did you choose the field that you're in? Why are you interested in plants and not interested in cancer? You have your own individual motivations, so tell people that. And importantly, it's about how you do that. This is your personality. Are you someone who is very focused and driven on understanding questions? Are you someone who comes up with great ideas? Are you someone who can establish collaborations? The how is your secret sauce, and the career story is a place for you to share that information. This is really going to highlight those motivations and non-technical skills. Again, what's your personal history that led to you being interested in that field? Are you a really good communicator? Are you good at establishing those collaborations? Are you good at bringing people together? These are the things that people are looking for when they're hiring. These are also the kinds of things that are important in different ways with different careers. When you know what you're good at, that gives the person you're talking to an opportunity to tell you how important those characteristics are for their particular profession. Most importantly, the career story starts to put together the value that you offer an organization. This is a great place to incorporate information you've learned from personality assessments. As I mentioned in the Career Exploration and Planning lesson, we recommend the StrengthsFinder personality assessment. It gives you great language that you can incorporate directly into your career story. Regardless, the goal here is to help people understand why you're interested in this particular thing and share those aspects to the value you offer an organization outside of your technical expertise areas. In thinking about creating a career story, it's good to answer some simple questions. So what motivates you to do what you do? I was always interested in individual differences. Why do some people develop alcoholism? How come some people who have genetic predispositions to that don't? But that's what interested me. What interests you? You got into your program for a particular reason. You chose your lab. You chose your project. How did you decide on that? Another thing to think about are what do you really like doing? In the prior module, we talked about keeping a journal. What are the things that you really enjoy? Is it talking about science? Is it doing the data analysis? There are things that we enjoy right now that can give you great insight into things you want to do in the future. And then outside of science, what do you do really well? How do you do that in your daily work? Do you like teaching people things? Do you like communicating complex ideas? Do you like solving puzzles? These are all things that can help inform your career story. Once you have a list of those, then you can put them together into a comprehensive answer to a question like, tell me a little bit about yourself, or why do you think you're interested in this career? Here's how an example career story would go. The setup would be leading with something like, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I really appreciate the opportunity to learn more about your experiences in this field. To give you a bit of background, I've always been interested in helping people solve their problems. Problem solving is what initially attracted me to preclinical drug abuse research, but over time, I've realized that I want to make a more immediate impact on people's lives. Regardless of the problem, I feel that I'm able to help people understand the real issues and create strategies for finding solutions. I believe that communication is often key for any solution, and I have an ability to both understand my audience and target messaging that will resonate with them. That's why I'm excited to learn more about your career. I think that working in higher education administration would allow me opportunities to utilize my skills and passions, and I'm curious to learn more about your experiences in this field. This is a great introduction to why I want to do what I want to do and how I operate. The initial piece is that setup for the research story. If someone's interested in learning more about my preclinical research, I'm prepared to tell them about it. I also use this opportunity to highlight my personality strengths. Using something like the StrengthsFinder personality assessment, I'm able to communicate my harmony, building consensus and bringing people together, communication, developer. The career story is a great opportunity for you to share the value you offer an organization simply by responding to a question about who you are. Here's another example. Again, we would start with the intro. I really appreciate the opportunity to learn more about your experiences. To give you a bit of background, I'm currently a postdoc at insert your institution here, where I study Alzheimer's disease. Through this work, I've developed deep expertise in neuroscience and honed my ability to communicate complex scientific concepts to diverse audiences. I've also learned a lot about my strengths throughout my career. I'm energized by tackling new ideas and staying on top of cutting-edge science. I have an ability to build authentic relationships, which I've enjoyed doing when collaborating with colleagues across disciplines. I found that I thrive on presenting information in a clear and engaging way. That's why I'm excited to learn more about your career. I think being a medical science liaison would allow me opportunities to utilize my skills and passions, and I'm curious to learn more about your experiences in the field. Again, if they want to know more about the Alzheimer's research I do, I'm prepared to tell them that. For a position like this, that also would actually give me an opportunity to demonstrate my ability to communicate complex scientific concepts. Again, using the second section to highlight my personality traits. In this case, learner, relator, and communication. This is language that comes directly from the StrengthsFinder assessment, but whatever you do to figure out your own personality qualities, this is a place to incorporate that information. When you can provide this information to someone with whom you're conducting an informational interview, you give them insight into who you are and how you operate to help them evaluate whether you would be a good fit for this role. Maybe you're a perfect match, maybe not, but sharing that information with them allows you to get that kind of insight. Easier said than done, I promise. In the next part of this lesson, You're going to do an activity that will allow you time to practice building your own research and career stories.